At the box office, The Shawshank Redemption lost a lot of money. It only made $727,000 in its first weekend. It's the most watched movie on IMDb right now. But no one talks about this. Rob Reiner gave the director $3 million to end the deal. Tom Cruise was interested. Harrison Ford was ready to go. All of them were turned down by the director. Then Morgan Freeman's great speech was ruined by an unknown hiss, and the jail where the movie was shot. The team was told about the screams they would hear at night by the guards. The real story behind this movie is even stranger than the movie itself. It all began with $1. Stephen King did something in 1977 that had never been seen before in Hollywood. His short stories could be turned into movies by young people for just $1. It wasn't an act to get attention. His only goal was to give back to the art form that made him so happy. King had done this 16 or 17 times by the mid-1990s. People with ability and a dream could get into the business through a quiet back door. Frank Darabont was one of them. In 1983, he was only 20 years old when he called King. The Woman in the Room is the name of the short story he chose. It's a heavy drama about a man who is thinking about killing his dying mother. It was only a 30-minute movie, but it made King feel bad. Afterward, he said it was the best short film of his work ever. In 1986, the movie finally came out on VHS, and Darabont was no longer a complete unknown. Then someone did something brave. Darabont offered King $5,000 in 1987 for the rights to a short story called Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. It was only 96 pages long and was part of a book called Different Seasons. It wasn't scary either. It was about hope, friendship, and being in jail. By that time, King could have charged a lot of money. Even though he was already well known, he remembered Darabont's earlier work and agreed to do the deal. After that, he did something strange. The check was never cashed. King sent the check back to Darabont years later, when The Shawshank Redemption was a big hit. It had a frame. It came with a note that said, "Love, Steve, in case you ever need bail money." That $5,000, which is about $14,000 today, didn't mean much to King in terms of money, but it meant a lot to him in other ways. It was trust. It was faith. It was magic that you can't buy with cash. But this trip almost never took place. King himself didn't think Shawshank would work as a movie. The story was mostly about one man telling another man what he thought about him. There wasn't much going on, and the framework was a lot more like a book than a movie. Not even the studios were excited. Prison movies weren't thought to do well at the box office. But Darabont didn't agree. He saw something that no one else did. He believed in the feelings, the ideas, and the people in them. He could see the promise right away. He didn't rush though. In 1987 he bought the rights, but didn't begin writing the story until 1992. Besides writing for The Blob, The Fly 2, and Elm Street 3, he did other work for 5 years and slowly built his name. He finally started writing Shawshank, and it only took him 8 weeks. As a result, Tim Robbins said it was the best story he had ever read. The same thing Morgan Freeman said. Then the moment that put everything to the test. Rob Reiner, a famous director and co-founder of Castle Rock Entertainment, made Darabont an offer that would change his life. $2 to $3 million just to step aside and let Reiner direct the movie instead. Your plan, Reiner? Make Harrison Ford play Red and Tom Cruise play Andy. Big people. Lots of money. Huge promise for the box office. That wasn't all. Castle Rock said they would pay for Darabont to direct whatever he wanted next. They gave him a blank check, so to speak. It's possible that the whole deal was worth $4 million. That's not just tempting for a broke director who hasn't done much before. It's crazy. Darabont gave it a lot of thought. He was poor as a child. He was 35 years old and still having trouble with money. He might be able to change his life with that much money. He also knew that Castle Rock could still push him aside. If they had said no, they might have lost everything. Still, he said no. He turned down millions of dollars to keep his idea in his own hands. He didn't get $3 million, but $750,000 to write and direct the movie himself, plus a cut of the money that made. He knew it was dangerous. But he later said, "You can keep putting off your dreams for money and die without ever having done what you set out to do." It was about them. It was a stand that made him who he was. Tom Cruise was also interested, but only if Rob Reiner directed. Cruise didn't trust Darabont because he had never directed a movie before and had worked with Reiner on A Few Good Men. Reiner wouldn't direct, so Cruise pulled out. Cruise walked away even after thinking about a middle ground. He missed out on Shawshank right then. But Darabont didn't. In Stephen King's original story, Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, Red was a white Irishman in his middle years whose red hair was turning gray. That's how it was written. They didn't follow that plan though. What Liz Glotzer, the producer, saw was different. She didn't care about the race description and made a bold idea instead. John Morgan Freeman. Freeman himself had doubts at first. He read in the book that Red was Irish and thought, I can't play an Irishman. Glotzer didn't care though. She felt something from Freeman's words, his presence, and the way he commanded with calm. It worked. They did so well that they left in a joke line from the script. He tells Andy, maybe it's because I'm Irish, when Andy asks him why he's called Red. It wasn't just funny, that joke. It showed that the movie was breaking the rules. When Freeman was cast, he didn't just change the role. It helped people remember Red. There were other plans for Freeman in Hollywood before he got the part. It's almost hard to believe the number of actors that were thought about. Brad Pitt, Harrison Ford, Gene Hackman, Robert Duvall, Paul Newman, Robert Redford, and even Clint Eastwood. Frank Darabont, the director, said that these were his first picks, but they were all booked. For example, Redford was working on Quiz Show, the movie that would go up against Shawshank at the Oscars. As each star went by, it brought them closer to Freeman, the person who made Red one of the most loved figures in movies. It turned into a family project, which most people don't know. There is also Morgan Freeman's son Alfonso Freeman in the movie. He acts out one of the prisoners yelling fresh fish when Andy gets to the jail. That's not all though. Those pictures that were used for Red's younger mug shots and release papers. Those were pictures of Alfonso as a child. Even though it was small, it was important. Through his real son, Red's past was being shown to him. After that, Alfonso worked with his dad again. And he was in C7N the next year. It was a whole different story to cast Andy Dufresne. The first pick was Tom Hanks, but he turned it down to play Forrest Gump. The Oscar went to him for that part. Kevin Costner also said no because he was busy, putting all of his attention into Waterworld. The movie wasn't very good, even though it cost $170 million to make. A lot of other famous people also passed. Johnny Depp, Nicolas Cage, and Charlie Sheen. They didn't take it. Darabont finally saw Tim Robbins in Jacob's Ladder and knew that he had Andy. But the movie was a disaster when it came out, even with Freeman and Robbins in it. It first came out on September 23, 1994. Early on, it only brought in $727. $327.27. It was only shown in 33 houses. It took 13th place at the box office. In contrast, that tiny start made up only 2.6% of the movie's entire US. The numbers didn't change even when it went to 972 screens. The movie made a total of $28.3 million in the US. The plan cost $25 million. Market your ads, the company probably lost a lot of money. Earnings from abroad? Only $541,480. That means that 98% of its money came from the United States. Outside of the US, almost no one watched it. In order to break even, a movie usually needs to make 2 or 3 times what it cost to make. It wasn't helped by the competition. Forrest Gump was already in charge. It came out in July and was still playing in cinemas when Shawshank got there. It made more than $330 million in the US alone. Then Pulp Fiction came out a few weeks later. On its first day, that movie made $9.3 million at 1,100 theaters. It caused a huge stir in popular culture. It was used by everyone. At the same time, Shawshank was being quiet. A slow jail story. Not much going on. No crazy editing, just company and hope. Also, not many people were excited to see that in 1994. Things looked better when Oscar time came around. At first, 7 awards were given to the movie. There were many awards for this movie, including Best Picture, Best Sound, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Actor for Freeman. It tried, but it failed to win any. I think Hanks beat Freeman. Darabont lost the Screenplay Award again, this time to Forrest Gump. Roger Deakins, who is a very good photographer, went home with nothing. The movie's name was still brought up a lot on Oscar night. That's when things changed. Warner Brothers chose to show the movie again. It made $12 million more. After that, they took a chance. In 1995, 320,000 VHS tapes were sent out. That was a big number for a movie that didn't do well at the box office. It did work though. In 1995, Shawshank was the movie that people rented the most. It did even better than Forrest Gump in video shops. However, the magic really took place in 1997. Ted Turner's TNT started playing the movie all the time. Not once a month or once a week, but almost every day. It was everywhere. By 2013, the movie had been shown on TV 151 hours a year. Most of the time, only Scarface and Mrs. Doubtfire were on. That memorable scene of Andy standing in the rain after getting away from jail has been shown 15 times since 1997. A lot of people watched it over and over. For many, it was a show that made them feel better. People used to not want to see this movie. But now it's IMDb's thought of one movie of all time. Every day they spent more than $100,000, making one of the most adored movies of all time. Still, the biggest problem wasn't a missing actor, a broken camera, or even the jail set itself. One slimy bug was all that was there. When they were making The Shawshank Redemption in 1994, they ran into a strange wall. There was a short, quiet scene where the kind old prisoner Brooks fed a baby crow named Jake. Not controversial at all, just a sweet moment. At first, the plot said that the crow should eat a live wax worm. This is when the American Humane Society came to help. They said no because killing a maggot would be against the rules for not being cruel to animals. The group went cold. What's that? Millions of people don't think twice about putting a bug on a fishing hook. But rules, there were rules. Everything had to be kept safe, even the smallest things. All of a sudden, the set went from being a Hollywood production to a strange moral dilemma. There were scenes of violence, abuse, and murder in the movie, but giving a crow a live worm seemed to go too far. The director Frank Darabont was shocked, but he had to do it. That stamp from the Humane Society that says no animals were harmed had to be at the end of the credits. They had to follow the rules, and so began one of the silliest treasure hunts in movie history. The crew's new job was to find a maggot that had died naturally. It sounds easy until you do it. Live wax worms can be bought at fish shops. They move around and wriggle, and most of the time they're healthy. So the filmmakers looked through tin after tin of them like police at a crime scene, hoping to find one that had already passed out. After hours of looking, they finally found the right target, a dead worm. What caused the death? Not sure, but it seemed pretty calm. At this point, Darabont was completely lost. His voice was full of sarcasm as he offered to have the worm's body cut up. That's what needs to be done to show there was no foul play. Should they get a coroner, testing, and maybe talk to the other worms to find out what happened? The person from the Humane Society didn't laugh. Because of this, the props staff found a way to keep things going. A fake wax worm was made. It had the right feel and look, pale and squishy, and it moved just enough to trick the camera. In the movie, you only see it for a second. But before that second, there were days of arguments, lost money, and one of the strangest production problems in Hollywood history. The group didn't give up though, even though things were crazy. Someone worked on the props and made a small director's chair out of matchsticks. A worm could fit in it. They made fun of the idea that the worms could take breaks between takes like stars. When the shoot was over, the crew even gave it to Darabont as a gift. The sound of Morgan Freeman in The Shawshank Redemption will stay with you forever. It's calm, smooth, and full of quiet power. But what was the story behind that voiceover? Strange. Frank Darabont, the director, did something that almost no one else in Hollywood does before the movie even starts. He had Freeman record the whole story ahead of time. This kind of audio is usually added at the very end, after the movie has been cut. Darabont, on the other hand, thought otherwise. He asked that Freeman's voice be played while the movie was being filmed so that all of the actors could feel the beat, tone, and feeling. He thought it would make people feel better than any guide could. It was then that Freeman went to an Iowa recording studio. It only took him 40 minutes to finish. It took 40 minutes to record one of the most famous voiceovers in movie history. It was easy, natural, and just right. That's what they thought. Then bad things happened. The sound crew heard a weak hiss in the background as they looked over the tapes. They couldn't fix or clean it up. The whole recording couldn't be used. He had to start over for Freeman. They didn't take any risks this time. They moved to a studio with the best gear that money could buy. This time though, the magic wasn't as easy to do. What used to take only 40 minutes has now taken 3 whole weeks. Every line, pause, and breath was worked on for more than 100 hours at a time. It was annoying, but it had to be done. It was perfect in the new form. There was more weight, rhythm, and depth in Freeman's speech. And in the end, the extra time made the story even more emotionally powerful. What began as a technical error turned out to be a creative success. At the same time, Darabont was having trouble with his own writing. He couldn't get enough of Goodfellas. He would put in his old VHS copy and watch it again every Sunday while Shawshank was staged. Not for fun, but to get fuel. He said the show was His lucky charm. It kept him going when he was tired, stuck, or stressed out. Why? How risky Scorsese is with commentary. Voiceover moves the story along in Goodfellas. It jumps around decades without slowing down. That made Darabont happy. But he was afraid to use narration so much in Shawshank at first. He was afraid he was doing something wrong. They are talking too much instead of showing. Then Goodfellas came on again one night and something clicked. He knew Darabont wasn't doing enough. He said that not giving more details made him feel like a cheapskate. That moment set him free. Like Scorsese did with Henry Hill, he stopped second-guessing and put all of his attention on Red's speech. Red says that Andy Dufresne has to crawl through 500 yards of stinky, disgusting stuff. This is one of the most memorable scenes in movie history. Most people don't know this though, but Tim Robbins only crawled through a 6-foot-long pipe. That's it. About as tall as a man when he's sitting down. Not even close to how big it looked in the movie. Smart tricks were used to pull off the whole trick. The directors made a short pipe and then edited and angled it in clever ways to make it look like a long, gross tunnel. It gets better still. Also, the waste wasn't real. In fact, it was a mix of sawdust, water, and chocolate syrup. It looked gross, but it wasn't real. But this part was real. That was the real stream where Andy climbs out at the end. It was also risky. It was full of chemicals and farm trash, so dangerous that they had to block it off and pour bleach in to kill the germs. A scientist still said it was dangerous after that. Tim Robbins jumped right into that mess. He put himself at risk of getting sick for just a few seconds of computer time. The movie was still magical after that. Is the cave really that long when Andy shines his flashlight into it? That was another trick though. Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, used a piece of stained cardboard. Yes, cardboard. It was painted with rings to make it look like the tube went on forever. It was put at the end of the 6-foot line. It looked real and deep because of the flashlight. Not a computer. No CGI, just paint, light, and arrangement that is just right. In the movie Barton Fink, Deakins had already used this trick. He just used a great idea again. What about that flashlight? It wasn't just a fake. In the tunnel scene, that was the only light that was used. That made the shadows and glow look real. You can see everything because it worked in real life. That's how they did it in 1994. No easy ways out, just pure skill. People will always remember the scene with the rain. Andy, his arms spread wide and drenched. Finally, it's free. It's strong. That wasn't meant to happen though. The first plan was longer. Andy would get off, walk across a field, and then get on a train. The team only had one night to film the whole escape though. All of it had to be cut down. They didn't think about the long trip. Instead, they thought about the time he stood in the rain. It's funny that the famous moment was changed at the last minute. Roger Deakins said afterward that he didn't even like the way it looked. He thought the shot had too much light, but director Frank Darabont and millions of watchers didn't agree. What began as a hasty choice turned into one of the most powerful scenes in movie history. All of those feelings. That freedom was caught in a single shot. The plot had even more at first. Andy was meant to get on a freight train that would take him away from Shawshank for good. Again though, there wasn't time. The first cut of the movie was almost 2.5 hours long. The train scene had to be cut because something had to go. A longer scene about Red getting used to life after jail was also cut. People who tried it didn't like it. They already knew Red would have a hard time, so they didn't need to linger. Another scene was cut where a guard looked at Andy's tube. It made the story go more slowly. In the end, cutting those scenes made the movie stronger and more moving. There is, however, one very important element that most people miss. Andy hides his hammer in a Bible. Not just any Bible. The notepad is put in the Exodus book. That's not a mistake. Exodus is the word for the way out. Moses led his people to freedom in this story. Andy hid his exit tool on that very page. When the guard opens the Bible for the first time, he goes straight to it. He finds the hole inside. A note too. It says that hope is inside. The same thing the warden told Andy before. That line really hits home. Andy's real rescue was being held by the warden the whole time. A small rock hammer that was hidden in a Bible to teach faith. In that moment, everything comes full circle. Like Moses and Christ, Andy becomes a sign of hope. He is a man who freed not only himself but also those around him. The Ohio State Reformatory was real. Not a set. It was built between 1886 and 1910 and has 6 floors. With 100 cells on each floor, it looked like a mix of a castle and a church. The biggest steel cell block that could stand on its own was built there. But it stopped running in 1990. Not only stopped but also condemned. A federal court said it was cruel. It smelled like mold and sadness when the Shawshank crew got there in 1993. The walls were broken and the paint was coming off. You didn't put on makeup. It was bad. The rooms for people who were locked up alone, called the hole, were also real. There are no lights, only concrete floors. A piece of bread every few days in complete quiet. The pain wasn't made up either. There were stories in the jail. Not like anything else in the movie. Over 155,000 prisoners went through from 1896 to 1990. It began as a school for change, but by the 1970s it had become very harsh. A 14-year-old boy was killed by beating in the basement. A few prisoners killed themselves. One person used petrol to set himself on fire. Even the warden's wife died there after being shot by her husband. The place smelled like pain. The actors said they could feel it, like the building itself was filled with real sadness. The story has roots in more than just movies. Leo Tolstoy's short story God Sees the Truth But Waits, which was written more than 100 years before The Shawshank Redemption, has many of the same themes. It's about a man who was wrongfully jailed for 26 years in Siberia. In jail he meets the real killer. He doesn't want to get even, so he decides to forgive. Sense a pattern. It's the same Andy Dufresne's spirit. Stephen King never said for sure that these two books were linked, but they both have themes of hope, forgiveness, and justice from above. There was a story in Even the Light. The photographer Roger Deakins did more than just light the scenes. He spoke with lightness. He used more than 25 maxi root lights and a lot of 12K HMI lights to make it look like natural light. Every shadow was planned. The scenes in jail were dark and heavy. The golden and bright outdoor beer scene. His face was always half in shadow, just like his soul. You didn't just watch Shawshank because of how Deakins lit it. You felt it. Then there was Brooks. He wasn't talked about much in the book. He broke our hearts in the movie. He had been locked up since 1912. The world was different when he got out in 1955. He didn't get it. He didn't fit in. To stay inside, he even tried to hurt a friend. He couldn't handle it when he finally got out. He carved Brooks was here into the ceiling and then hung himself. We felt more than just tears when we saw that scene. It told us to be careful. Red saw it. We did the same thing. That's what made Red's trip so strong. Red didn't give up in the end, but Brooks did. Tom's story also changed. Tommy is moved around in Stephen King's book. He stays alive. He is shot in the movie. Hadley does what the guard tells him to do, lying that he is trying to escape. That moment took away Andy's chance to use the system to prove he was innocent. It made us realize how bad things got in the jail. Tommy was not old. He was nice. He was married and had a daughter. And they got rid of him. It wasn't just a figure of speech, it was murder. That death made Andy's choice to run away feel not only brave but also important. It was fair play, that was the only kind he could find.